Let's bring in NewsNation senior national security contributor, Lieutenant General Richard Newton on this, former U.S. Air Force assistant, Vice Chief of Staff. What do you make of the absence of Ukraine in these talks so far?
Well, good morning, Marni. I think there's a purpose in these talks are twofold. One is to reestablish dialogue between the United States and Russia. Any type of modicum of meaningful conversation occurred with Secretary Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov at a G20 on the sidelines for just a few minutes back in the fall of 2022. So it's literally been several years since the United States and Russia had any meaningful dialogue. And the second was to establish a process for the ensuing peace negotiations. And that's where I strongly believe, and I believe the president's correct on this, that's where President Zelensky and Ukraine will be squarely in the middle of those peace negotiations. So that's where we're going to end up here. The fact that Ukraine wasn't with these initial discussions in Riyadh, that's not concerning to me. What's most I think is good news here is that, as I mentioned, start of a dialogue finally between U.S. and Russia, and we've got, I believe now, a framework to move forward on these peace negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, diplomacy is really the only way out. At some point, everyone's going to have to get around the table. But how cautious should the Trump administration and others be in Putin's intentions here, the risk in trusting him?
You cannot trust Putin. Putin is the belligerent here. Putin is the one that you and I were on air when he attacked on February 24th in 2022 and the number of atrocities he committed against the Ukrainian people. He cannot be trusted. But nonetheless, I believe this is, if you're going to come to an end of the bloodshed where you've had over 1 million people killed and wounded on both sides, you've got to have negotiations. You do not, however, negotiate with Putin in terms of a friendly negotiation. You have to do it from a position of strength. And that's where President Trump, I believe, is starting this ensuing dialogue. But this is going to be, Marni, this is going to be a very complicated and very intricate set of negotiations for the next several weeks, if not months. So the expectations of the American people is there will be a lot of twists and turns here. But I believe President Trump, and we're going to be negotiating from a piece of strength, a position of strength. But I think you're also going to closely engage and have at the table President Zelensky.
You mentioned the timeline here, and it may take time, but what we're hearing, at least Bloomberg is reporting, the Trump administration has told European officials they're aiming for an Easter deadline. Do you think that's a realistic goal?
Depends on what you mean by deadline. Deadline for what? If you're looking for a deadline for a framework of a settled solution here, perhaps. But the other really important aspect of this is there's one thing with regarding to the peace negotiations. It's another thing of enforcing it. And the only way you're going to be able to enforce any type of negotiated settlement here between Russia and Ukraine is security guarantees for Ukraine, specifically for President Zelensky. And those security guarantees have to come by through, I believe the United States will still have to provide weapons. I believe you're also going to have to see the European nations, specifically NATO, have to have providing peacekeeping forces, if not in Ukraine, but certainly on the borders of Ukraine, because you've got to make sure that Putin understands that the United States and the European allies will continue to deter any thought at all that he may have to invade again another nation such as Ukraine, or perhaps even a NATO nation here. So the aspect of the security guarantee after the negotiated settlement is in place, that's what's going to be very difficult, but also very important.
Wow. Well, what a week it may be. Lieutenant General Richard Newton, thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.